First up is Xray, and yeah, this is really excellent work. Really good proportions, good detail. Um, think that I think you have more columns than I'm seeing here because I'm just seeing one, two, three, four, five. You've got one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. So yeah, maybe just get those to match. And it's interesting because this column has some additional detail, so that's something you can add, although it doesn't necessarily seem like the other ones match. So some additional things you can add are, some of this unevenness at the edge here. You can make this sort of imperfect here. Bend in some areas. Right now it's very geometrical. Also separate it. See how there's sort of a top piece and a bottom piece? If you want to add some imperfections, you can add some detail first. I like using the multi-cut tool, Mesh Tools multi-cut. If I hold down Control, you'll see it'll allow me to place more edges. And then Q for selection, and just Control Space to get this back. Just want to make sure my modeling toolkit's tuned off. And I can make some slight adjustments to these, just to make things a little imperfect, or scale something a little bit. You can add those little touches, and it tends to make things, look more real because they're not perfectly straight, especially for some like sort of a model like this is. Also for this base, you could have, I think there's sort of a top piece and the bottom, and if you want to go nuts, you can do the individual boards, although normally that would probably be done with a texture. You can add a door handle, and but yeah, I mean, this is just, it's great. It's really good. It's above expectations, I would say. Even these pieces are really well built right there. So yeah, very good work. Next up is Brittany, and yeah, once again, really good. Lots of detail, good attention to proportions. I think that you might want to, if you look at how much that overhangs there, it doesn't really overhang here, so you could probably adjust that, narrow that down a little bit. It's good that you have the separate pieces in here, although you could probably add one more because there's sort of smaller, and there's 4 of them there. And yeah, you've got the pieces here, and you even added an additional anvil and hammer, which is a nice touch. I might reduce the thickness here because if you look at the thinness of the walls there, it looks pretty thin. Can zoom in a little bit. And if you look at the the height of this door, I would argue it's a little bit lower, maybe a little taller as well. And you can probably add just like you have support beams on here, you can probably add some of that on there, though it's hard to see. I imagine there would be some. And you can do the cross beam on this one as well. And like I was showing on the previous one, you could add some detail to some of these, and they have a little bit of a bend to them, so you could add some of a bend like I showed in the last video, and maybe add this this base piece here would be a nice touch as well. So a few areas for improvement, but overall this is very good work for blocking it out. It's beyond blocking, certainly. Next up is Amelia. First question was about the Xray thing. If you go to shading, Xray, that'll solve that issue. And let's take a look at that. I just do Control Spacebar to clean up the interface. So yeah, you've got some good basic blocking here. And you've got a lot of the holes here. You've got the some different windows there. And yeah, it looks like you've paid attention to the size of the windows on top and on the bottom. I would say that these columns are on the thick side, but you're probably going to want to add some of this detail to the columns as well, where you can see the, the additional detail there. I think for the stairs, I would probably just rebuild them, count the number of steps here and duplicate individual panels for the stair. I'll show you a quick trick for that. Let's do this. So I'll create a cube, and this could help everybody, I think, in one area or another. And let's get that pretty small and narrow. And it's it's the width between here and the edge of this, and so I would actually say this might, oh, you did that as a separate piece. I would probably just grab these vertices, and you have, oh, I see why you did that. Okay, let's just leave it as a separate piece. Just scooch that in a little bit. So let's say the stairs are maybe that wide. Okay, something like that, and I think it starts, yeah, the first step is a little bit above here, something like that. And so let's say we want to go from here to there. So let's just, kind of a good way to measure this, I'm going to do something called freeze transformation, modify freeze transformations, then I'll just zero those out. And I'm going to duplicate this and move the duplicate just to get the position of this last one here. I think that goes to the front of this and up a bit. Okay. All right, so we have, let's call that one, what does 8 look like? Well, it looks pretty good, and minus 6.5 just to have more round numbers. Okay, so 8 and 6.5. 8 in the y direction, minus 6.5 in the z direction. Okay, let's try to remember that. And then let's go back to that picture. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Well, we want 15 of those. And so let's get our calculator out. Okay, there's a calculator right here in Google. So we said minus 6.5 and then divided by 15 copies gives us minus 0.433. So if I have this selected, I go edit, duplicate special options, and it's good to reset this before you start. And then we'll say translate. That was how much it moved back in the z direction. So this is x, that's y, that's z, and this is the translate. So minus 0.433, and then it moved up as well. So we said it moved up 8. Clear that. So 8 divided by 15, so 0.533. So 0.533, and duplicate special. Made one mistake there, sorry. I failed to put in the number of copies, 15. Duplicate special. So you see now, like very, very quickly and very accurately, got the right number of steps, and they're all evenly spaced, and they fill exactly the space that I wanted to. So, and then I can put in those side things, etc. So that's duplicate special, and it's really handy for something like that. So I would repeat that process for these little guys, all those little ones. So make it nice and skinny and put that little whatever bump in the middle, and then count them, and then use duplicate special to get the right number of them and all evenly spaced apart. Um, and yeah, I think this is a good first pass. Just got to start adding that detail. So yeah, keep going. Good work. Next up is Elina, and yeah, looks like a good start. You've got a lot of the basic shapes in there. The first thing I notice is that the proportions look quite a bit off. I would say the well, just a little bit of everything is off. So if you look at this distance, this length, I would say this is much longer that direction and then shorter this direction. Um, I think that yeah, this I think this wouldn't go all the way around. It's I can see that you've got these things here and that there, but it wouldn't cross underneath. I'm not sure what these pieces are, where those are coming. Oh, are they these side things here? Okay, maybe they're just a little low for some reason. They need to be higher up and kind of scale down a little bit. But yeah, I don't think um, they don't go below this height, so they would they wouldn't, like, it would be something like that and scooch back some. Um, and then yeah, a thing to do with proportions is choose something as sort of a measuring stick. For example, take a window, um, or these, one of these panel doors, and say, okay, well, how many of these doors high is the building? If we took one of those and measured it, went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever it is, how many wide is it? And then use that as use something as a standard of measuring, and so that everything else can be compared against that. Because right now a lot of things seem out of whack, and so it's hard to know which one to adjust if you don't set a standard. So pick one thing, get that one thing looking like it's the right proportion, and then measure everything against that so it's all correct relative to that piece. Because right now I think it's too kind of tall and narrow this way, and should be longer and sort of flatter relatively. These look quite thick as well. I mean, it's an opportunity to add some detail to those. Compared to the size of this thing, the porch looks very deep in this direction compared to that. More of these and longer on the top. Oh, and I noticed this. You see these black kind of things when you have surfaces on top, and you've got a lot of kind of crazy stuff going on with this surface and one surface on top of another and all these different pieces. So I think this could be just much simpler. It looks really overcomplicated. I mean, having some extra structural pieces underneath could be kind of cool, but I think really you just need a cube here, and what I'd like to do is I'll hold down D and V at the same time, and middle mouse drag, and it'll snap that pivot point to the corner, and then I'll hold down C for curve snap and middle mouse drag, and can get it to this edge here, and then just kind of narrow this. Is that too high? Probably. And let's go out this way, all the way to about there, and go out this way. Might have to adjust this a little bit, and then rotate that down, just using middle mouse drag. Oh yeah, this thing's getting in the way now. Well, I'll get rid of that one too. Yeah, and the other thing was those pieces were really dense. So that looks pretty good, I guess. And then I might just just to get these to match, I'd probably duplicate this and move this away from the other one. I just did Control D to duplicate. I'm going to move the pivot to this other corner, D and V, and click over there. And then it might help to freeze transforms on that. Modify freeze transformations. Oh, isn't that gonna... Let me do that. I'll hold on D and V and then middle mouse drag there. There we go. It kept it straight. Now I'll freeze transforms and hold down C for curve snap and get that there, and then rotate this out. It's going to be 90 degrees here, minus 90. And just get it to the right height. Yeah, this one might need to be a little longer. And then I can just kind of... Actually, let's make sure the heights of these two things match. Okay. And then I can just move these verts into position. I'll just take these guys and move them back here. These guys, move them back there. And then, yeah, vertex, grab these, move them there. And something like that. So that was like a pretty simple approach. And now, you know, I just have just two very simple, clean surfaces there to get that shape instead of all the kind of busy stuff you had going on. And you could probably clean that up a little bit, get that a little tighter. But it also doesn't have to be perfect, right? There could be a seam there. So yeah, so big thing is proportions, and then clean up some of those odd pieces. And there was really no reason for this to be so dense, unless that's what helped get your booleans to work. Also, I would say that these are extremely thick, these doors here. Also very dense. You don't need all that detail on there. It's not adding any information to have it, you know, so many edges. Next up is Xray, and yeah, really good start. It looks like you really paid attention to proportions, so that's good. I think that you know, there's obviously a lot of detail you'll be able to add in the next round, but this is a good start, good proportions. You might be able to go a little thinner on that edge there. I think the biggest thing I'm noticing is that the front of these steps should, you know, angle inward towards each other. What I would do for that is I would select those and then right mouse click, go to vertex, and then select all these and all those. R for scale and scale those in. And then you'll repeat that. I think the same is true of this deck on top a little bit. Is it? Maybe? Yeah, I mean, it really seems like at least that is angling inward, so which means this must be as well. So that's a little trickier. The thing is that you could still do the same technique, except for that you'll have to place those you know, those vertical pieces again. So I can get, whoops, why aren't those scaling? That's very strange. Should just, yeah, that's doing it. I don't know what I'm doing wrong there. Let me check my scale options. Change it to world. Ah, that fixed it. So for that I just did held down R, left mouse click, and change it from object to world. So it's relative to the world. Okay, so that works for kind of shaping that a little bit. And then unfortunately then you'll have to kind of manually go in and move these one at a time to realign them to that new shape, but that won't take long. Actually, I think you could go further with that than I did too. Yeah, but good basic proportions, good blocking, and then just keep going. Next up is Reese, and by the way, I realized I switched to 2018 during this video because at one point one of them wouldn't open in 2015. So, but I'm not showing anything that's any different in 2018, so it shouldn't make any difference. So yeah, I think this looks good. I think that the big thing to fix is the proportions. I mean, it's really good that you got the windows nice and small, but I think this is, shorter and wider. One thing I mentioned in a previous video was the idea of taking something like a window here and using it as a sort of measuring stick, and saying like, you could do it in Photoshop or something and say this building is like, how many of these square windows high? So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's call it 6 high. And I'll just duplicate this here just to get that idea. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 high. So, but then how many wide between here and the door? So if the door is here, it's probably like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wide, right? So if we do that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wide, right? So that tells me the building, everything should be a lot wider. Compared to what you have. Anyways, just to give you an idea of, getting the proportions right. And I guess I didn't select everything. Oh, that's not center. Let's just center the pivot. Modify center pivot. Oh, that kind of screwed stuff up a little bit. Anyways, you get the idea. And so go back in and get the proportions right. Because and then look for little details to add. Maybe you want to model that barrel and, get real skinny with the window pane separators there. Look how thin that line is. I'll zoom in. Look how thin that line is. And, yeah, it's good you got some nice detail in here, but again, these lines could get a little thinner. And, yeah, you can see this little extra surface along the top, so you could add that thin thing along the top and add some imperfection, like a little bit of curve to the shape there, as I showed in previous videos. If you look at some of the detail here, you can get some of those sticks coming out and that kind of thin top there. So look for the little things. This is a relatively simple building, so I think it's kind of the smaller details that'll bring it to life, and then also getting the proportions right. Next up is Marcus, and he brought up an interesting question, which is that as soon as he adjusts the subdivisions here, things go kind of wacky. And it's an unfortunate thing, but as soon as the model has been changed, like if you've pulled on any vertices or if you've done like a disproportionate scale, often the subdivision doesn't work anymore. So usually you have to change that before. And there's a couple of different things you can do. You can go to Edit Mesh, Subdivide, or Add Divisions it's called here. I should probably show this in the other version of Maya, but I can just apply that. And see, that doesn't have the same problem. It's not using the same control. Let's show that in the other version of Maya just so you see. So yeah, same problem. And here it's Edit Mesh. Oh, it's still called Add Divisions here, whatever. So yeah, you can. Oh hey. Maybe it wants to be like 2 or something. Oh, that didn't work in there. Fascinating. Oh, add divisions to edge. I'm sorry. I picked the wrong one. Edit mesh. So there's more than one edge divisions. We want to add divisions to the face. Okay, sorry. I keep messing up. Just reset this. Okay. There we go. Now it's acting normally. All right. So yeah. So same thing. You'll notice in this edit mesh menu that there's like a vertex section, an edge section, and a face section, and some of the things are duplicated, like add divisions is in more than one section. So, or you can use something like the multi-cut tool, which I like very much. So mesh tools, multi-cut tool, and if I hold down Control, I can add an edge. And if I hold down Control and Shift, see it'll snap. And that'll get it right in the center there if I want, so I can do it that way too. So yeah, and now let's just compare this to. Okay, so we've got some of the basic shapes in here. Again, I would say take a look at the proportions. I think you've got a ways to go. Look at how this is kind of cut here, sort of in front of the building, so you'll want to kind of cut that there. And then you've got these little stairs there, you've got a ramp here, stacks of boards. You could do stacks of the little sacks here. You've added some barrels, and that's nice. Just going to go back to object mode because that's bugging me. And yeah, make the 2 separate doors and put those cross beams on those, and cut the door in the side and put the door frame, put the slanted roof on top. So yeah, a lot of adjustments to make, sort of double check your proportions, but a lot of that stuff's adding detail. So I know this time it was basic blocking, but so I think it's a good start, and yeah, keep going. Next up is Jasmine, and yeah, I think that the issue with some people opening the file is that I suspect it's done in a different version of Maya. I was able to open it in Maya 2018. So yeah, I think if you're doing the hotel and this is the photo, I think it's really nowhere matching at all. So I think really take a step back, study the photo and try and match the image that you're trying to model. Really, I think that I'd expect you to be further along at this point and more closely matching the design you were given. So you've got a ways to go. And yeah, if you need any help, please let me know. Next up is Cody, and yeah, good start. Got some of the basic shapes in there, some good blocking. I think that there's certain proportions you'll want to take a closer look at. I'm looking, for example, at the width of the front door. This looks kind of longer, that is to say taller and narrower. And one thing I mentioned before was the idea of using something as a measuring stick in the image. So taking like one of these windows, for example, and making a cube or whatever the size of that window, and saying, okay, well, how many windows tall is the building? Well, how many windows wide is the building? And so on and so forth, to use it as a measuring stick to check your proportions. So now would be a good time to do it before you start adding too much detail. It'll be much easier to make those changes now in this kind of rough form than later on when you've got a lot of detail in there. And there is a lot of opportunity to get some nice detail in there. There's of course all the window frames and doors and all that stuff, but then there's also some of these props. The ladder would be easy to build, and you could do these stacks of whatever they are, those sacks, and even some of this more complex stuff if you're up for it. But get the basics right first, and then you can start adding some of that detail and really check your proportions. Ashley had a question about the Boolean tool, and what I would say about the Boolean tool is that it's bad and don't use it. I know that's taught in this lesson, but it creates not great geometry, like these weird diagonal lines, and the kind of broken things that you mentioned. I just don't think it's a good way to work. I mean, if I was going to cut a window out of this building, what I might do is, let's just pretend, for example, I'm going to go in the front view. Let's say there was a window at the front of this building. I'm just going to isolate this with isolate select right here. And let's say I needed to cut a window out or two here, even though that's not in the image. I'm just using it as an example. So what I would do is go to Edit Mesh, Multi-Cut. I'm sorry, it's Mesh Tools, Multi-Cut. And the other one, it's Edit Mesh. And I can kind of slice through the object like a laser. So if I hold down Shift to get a straight line and just click from one side to the other, see how that cuts a line just straight through the whole object. And then I'll do that again. Mesh Tools, Multi-Cut. And then I could do, the vertical ones. I'm just being really sloppy here, but I think you get the idea. And then, you could take these and delete those out. The catch then is that I'd have to, you already have the thickness on this, so I could then I could fill the whole there. I could bridge these together is what I would do actually. So I'll select these edges and those. Whoops. So let's try that again. And Shift double click there. So I select those two sets of edges. Then I'm going to do Shift right mouse click, bridge, and see how it fills that in. I'll do that one more time. Double click, Shift double click. Oops, I keep getting the wrong thing. Okay, check my selection there. And then bridge is also under mesh. I always use that shortcut. Edit mesh bridge. It's the other place to get it. So yeah, so that's more how I would do that kind of thing. I don't use Boolean because it gets, as you've mentioned, weird results. And even if it does work, it creates all these weird diagonal lines, which I think are not good topology. So it's not necessarily the way I do stuff. And then back to your actual work. Yeah, you've got a good start. Don't know why that's flying in there. Maybe that's just a temporary thing. Yeah, and again, look at the proportions. I think you're not too bad. Maybe a little taller. This building could be a little taller. Bench is looking the backing is looking kind of big compared to the length. That's good. You have those steps down there. Maybe these two windows a little farther apart. And as I've mentioned with a few other ones, that whole measuring stick idea, basically using a window or something as a way to check proportions. So you might want to do that here to help you out. But they look okay. They're not too bad. They could be closer. But there's opportunity to add these little, vertical supports as detail, and of course the door frames and window frames, and the kind of individual beams of the bench there, and some of this detail on the columns like there. So lots of stuff to add.